So welcome virtually to each of my friends who joined this evening for a special gathering. It's a gathering that it's a little bit painful, as you know, because to be in the shul alone and to not be here with each of you is not the way we wanted things. It's not the way we expected things to be going. And this Pesach of 2020, 5780 will be a Pesach to remember, but it will also be a very difficult Pesach, and hopefully one that we won't have to go through again in this form. But nonetheless, we're here, and we have to learn Torah, and we have to inspire one another, and try to give over a message that is meaningful, that hopefully uplift each of us this Yom Tov. So I wanted to talk about something a little different. Before I do, of course, I want to dedicate these words to the Refuah Shalema of all the Choli Yisrael, all those who are ill, and not just the Choli Yisrael, but all those who are ill, suffering from this terrible illness. Hashem should provide an immediate refuah, no more sacrifices, no more losses, not in the world. May this hopefully bring about a period of peace, of achdus, of growth, of warmth, of spirituality, and restore us back to our shuls and Batei Midrashos very soon. Years ago, I attended one of my first Yankee games. It was on Chol HaMoed Pesach, early in the season. My father took me and my brothers, along with cousins and some friends. And it was the days of Don Mattingly, of Dave Winfield, Ricky Henderson, and we came in true Jewish form, carrying bags of food, loaded with kosher Pesach snacks, sampling of Barton's chocolates. We had the gel rings, the macaroons, the matzah and cream cheese already soggy. And on the bottom of the bag, we had a bunch of soda cans. Because they had one rule at Yankee Stadium before all of the draconian standards that existed now with security. You can't bring soda cans into Yankee Stadium. And the reason was very simple. They sell soda there and they don't want to lose a profit. So not to be stuck without a Pesach beverage, we buried the soda cans deep down to the bottom of the bag. As we approached the security guard, he asked each of the adults with us, "Do you have soda?" And they each nodded, "No." "Do you have soda?" "No." "Soda, no." Incredulous, I didn't understand what was going on. I was a young boy. I turned around to my father to correct him so he understood. I said, "Daddy, what do you mean? We have soda." Quickly, without batting an eye, each of the older children who were with us quickly corrected and said, no, we only have one soda can. And I remember my friend, my neighbor Sean at the time, Nebuch, they made him chug that bubbly beverage down on the spot. And before I could continue my crusade for the truth, they hushed me up and we were ushered into Yankee Stadium. The children are naturally honest. It's one of the reasons that we adore them. They are toho kibaro. In every way, children are precisely the way they are supposed to be. But how quickly they learn the art and the convenience of dishonesty. How soon do they corrupt their holy little neshamos. Real chinuch, though, real education demands the opposite. Pure educators would never teach a child to lie. They would never talk about dishonesty. The dishonesty is never a means of achieving one's goals. The Torah is unequivocal about lying. Lo sana b'recha et shaker, lo signovo lo sichashu, lo shishakro, ish bamiso. And then lastly and most powerfully, midvar sheker tirchak. Distance yourself from a lie. Rav Simcha Bunim Pershischa, the great Hasidic master, said that of all the mitzvahs in the Torah, most of them are mitzvahs deoraisa, and the rabbis come around and they add on to the mitzvahs harchakos, dinei derabanan, fences around the Torah, siyagim. But Rav Simcha Bunim notes that the Torah provides its own fence around lying. Midvar sheker tirchak, shelo matzina l'chol Torah kulo shenas harchaka, rak chacham mizir lasos harchaka, aval b'sheker, Tzavsa Torah ba'atma son harchaka. That when it comes to falsehood, the Torah creates its own harchaka, its own barrier, its own fence, protective fence around the Torah. So it's strange, because as careful as we are about telling a lie, about dishonesty. It's strange that on the evening that is dedicated to Chinuch Lebanim, the evening that is dedicated towards education, that we would create an emphasis upon dishonesty and lying and stealing. It's widely assumed that there is a minhag, that there is a custom on Seder night to steal the Afikoman. The truth is that although few contemporary mentions of the custom exist, before about 150 years ago, we don't find the custom mentioned beferish at all. I quoted for you in the book, All for the Boss, by Ruchama Shane, about her father, saintly father of blessed memory, Rabbi Yaakov Yosef Herman, a story that she recalls when she was little, a touching story. Our house was crowded with guests as usual. My mother, my sisters, and I sat at our own separate table. The recitation of the HaGadol started. When we reached the Manishtana, my father called to me to the men's table. Feeling very proud, I stood there chanting the 4 questions as my parents, my brother, my sisters, and the guests expressed their delight and admiration. This success gave me the courage to steal the Afikoman, which is standard practice in many families, although nobody in our family had ever dared to do so. Slowly and quietly, I crept to my father's seat. I removed the Afikoman from where he had kept it buried to hide it. And when the time came to eat the Afikoman, my father looked for it in the place where he had put it, but to his bewilderment, he couldn't find it. "Who took the Afikoman?" he said. I ran to him and said bravely, "Papa, I stole the Afikoman. What kind of present will you give me if I give it back to you?" And my father gave me an amused look and said, "Ruchamallah, bring the Afikoman this minute. The guests are waiting." So I hurried to take out the Afikoman from its hiding place and handed it to my father, and Papa stroked my cheek and whispered into my ear, "You'll get a very special present from me after Yom Tov." The guests smiled happily. And many, many years have passed since then, and now, when I recall that event, I realize that I have long forgotten the special present, what it was. But my father's words, "The guests are waiting," have remained etched in my memory and still ring in my ears. Another memoir in Yiddish, Zichronot fun Tzvei Doros, by Alexander Ziskin Horowitz, where he recalls how he stole his father's Afikoman, and his father gave him nuts and candy as a treat, but the next day he warned him, he said, "Don't you try this again." Where do we know this minhag from? Where does it come from? So as I said, it doesn't really exist in history, but the Rishonim and later on describe rituals of the Seder that sort of resemble taking the Afikoman. The Magen Avram describes famously, "V'yesh nosnin osa al ktafei and zecher l'tzias Mitzrayim." There are those who place the Afikoman on their shoulders and schlep it around to commemorate the Yetzias Mitzrayim. The earliest source, though, that we have of anyone stealing the Afikoman might be an allusion made in the picture version of the second Nuremberg HaGadol, published around 1470 or 1480. In the HaGadol, under the Yachatz section, not later on by Tzafon when they're eating the Afikoman, but earlier on when the father breaks the matzah, it shows a little picture in the top right corner of a man and 3 boys sitting around the table with cups. And the caption reads, "Hana'arim poshtim yedehem lakabel Afikoman me'avian." Young children are reaching their hands out to take the Afikoman from their father, as if to say that at this juncture in the Seder earlier on, for some reason people are trying to grab the Afikoman, leaving many historians to believe that what the Nuremberg HaGadol was depicting was a scene of children, the revelry, the joy, the excitement of stealing the Afikoman. The minhag, though, is of hazy origin. And if you want the real source of where this comes from, of how it developed, you have to look to the Rambam. The Rambam has a line which is based on the Gemara Pesachim. The Rambam writes in Hilchos Chametz Umatzah Perek Zayin Olcha Gimel that you do all sorts kinds of tricks and games to engage the children, to keep them awake, to keep them from falling asleep. Shlo Yishanu. The Rambam writes, "V'chotfin matzah zeh mizeh." We steal the matzah, we take the matzah one from the other, uchiyotze b'dvarim ha'elu, and all sorts of tricks and all sorts of things. like this. What is the Rambam talking about? Chotfin matzah zemizeh. Who's taking matzah one from the other? Chok Yaakov writes that the Rambam Efshar mizeh nispashet haminhag shemanichim letinokos b'medinos elu lachtof ha'afikoman. That it's possible. When the Rambam says we're taking the matzah from one another, this is the source, the Rambam. That we take the Afikoman, we steal the Afikoman. That's where it comes from. Why do we encourage children to steal Afikoman? Simple reason is, Shelo Yishano, the Gemara Pesachim says, Chotfim, Shelo Yishano, they shouldn't fall asleep. More Farish language, the Maram Chalva, comments, L'simcha. The purpose is to engage them with joy, to bring happiness to your Seder. And the Chidushe Rabbi Yonasan Milunil, the Ri Milunil writes in Pesachim there, Chotfim es hamatzos miyad tinokos l'sachek bahem. We do it so they play with it. What a very normal and very strange thing to find codified in the halachic sparim. You have to play with your kids. You have to enjoy them. And so we encourage them with this game of teaching them to steal the Afikoman. The problem with this is, as I illustrated, a chinuch one. Theft is not something we encourage. It's aser many times over in many different forms in the Torah. Lying is discouraged. It's not the Jewish way. Midvar sheker tirchak, distance yourself from a lie. And yet on the night of the Seder, we encourage children to do so. You see this little cartoon that I put in the sources. If you have it, if you don't, we can send it out later again. It shows a Hasidic guy with a gun in his hand and sunglasses on, and he's holding a stick up against someone who looks a lot like Uncle Sam. There's a bag to his right. On the floor it says Afikoman. And he says, I tell you, this is so much better than stealing the Afikoman. That image, and under that, in the original version of the cartoon, it says the Jewish view on lying. I don't understand. How could it be that we encourage children to act in a dishonest way if the implication is that they're going to think that we're educating children to be a bunch of liars, thieves, tricksters, Ponzi schemers? And if you think this is my concern or some contemporary cartoon, the Orchos Chaim writes, Uvegoyim nishma sheyehudim elamdim yoldeim liganov. That the world is going to hear that they've taught their children how to steal. So is it really worth it to engage the kids with a game about chodfim zeh mizeh, to steal the matzah, if the implication is anti-Semitism, the implication is that we teach children to steal? Furthermore, the very HaGadol begins with an Arami Oved Avi, the story of Lavan, the trickster who confused Yaakov, who swindled our ancestor time and time again, who attempted to murder Eliezer to thwart the Shidduch. And according to Midrashic lore, it was Arami Oved Avi, it was Lavan's trickery that we swore a life against, that we said we're not going to behave like that. Yet on the night of the Seder, the message should be, don't be a liar, don't be like Lavan. He tried to kill us. Be honest, be straightforward, be upright, be Yeshurun, be Yashar. And what does it say? Steal the Afikoman. Act like a thief. But the presence of theft and dishonesty at the Seder is not only present in a minhag, a modern day minhag to steal the Afikoman. It is in fact a predominant theme throughout the entire story of the Sipur Yetzias Mitzrayim, the story of the Exodus. The Pasuk tells us, and if you're following along in the sources, you can look. In Source 19, V'sham'u lekolecha uvasa tav ziknei Yisrael melech Mitzrayim amartem ilav Hashem Elokei Avrim nikra leina. Moshe says, what name should I quote? Who should I tell Paro and the Jewish people has said? And he says, it was God who has sent you. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. V'ata nilchana derech shloshes yomim b'midbar v'nizbecha l'Hashem Elokeinu. Now go 3 days in the midbar and you'll sacrifice to Hashem our God. So we all know this story. We said to Paro, 3 days, and what do we really mean? Not a 3-day tour, a 3-hour tour. We say 3 days, and we really mean, I'm leaving forever. The whole thing was a lie. It was a charade. It was a trick. And everyone wants to know, why with God's incredible powers, the Nisim V'Niflot, why in the world do we have to trick Paro? Why do we have to lie to him? But it goes further, because not only do we lie to him about the 3-day journey, I'm going to give you gold and silver. And I will give you, and you will borrow from your neighbors, silver, gold, dresses, things for the children. You will borrow clothing, place them on your children, and wink, wink, you're not borrowing them, you're stealing from the Egyptians. Really? Really? The whole process of Yetzias Mitzrayim. We say 3 days, we meant we're going forever. We're going to borrow some clothing and gold and silver, we're going to steal it. The Rashbam already says in his commentary in source 21, if you're following along, that we didn't mean to borrow b'matana gemura v'chaluta. We meant that we're going to borrow it, really we're going to take it. It's a gift. We're asking them for a gift. Okay, so the Rashbam resolves this problem. But if you look at some of the commentators, they interpret it literally. We asked to borrow, we meant to steal. Shadal, for instance, says, Ein safek. There is no doubt. Shahayazeh maseh tachbula. This was a trick. We don't have to trick the Egyptians, but for whatever reason, God, who can do anything, told us, I want you to lie to the Egyptians about 3 days. I want you to lie to them about borrowing clothing, and really you're going to steal. There are many approaches to how we understand this dishonesty in the Yetzias Mitzrayim story. There is, first of all, I wrote here the Ibn Ezra, I meant the Barbanel. The Barbanel has an approach that all's fair in love and war. To paraphrase Don Quixote, who says it is lawful to use sleights and stratagems to attain a wished end, which often today is quoted as all's fair in love and war. So the parish I gave you here that cites the Barbanel 23 Mikros Gedolos Rabbi Nim Yalkud Perushim writes the Kosov Harav the Ran Shirah b'Sefer Echad Shelo Kasha Klau Ki b'Milchama Mutter Lasos Kol Arumos V'Tachbulos Neged Oyev. When you're in war, you do whatever you have to do to win. You lie, you steal, you cheat, you steal. You do whatever is necessary to take from the enemy to win. Because this is a life and death game. And either my life matters or your life matters. And so I'm going to do whatever I have to do. And that's the lesson that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was teaching us, even though we didn't have to do it. He designed it, that we have to do it that way. Of course, this approach during World War II had a much different ramification. One of the most comprehensive and probably the first real monumental work depicting the horrors of the Holocaust, Survival in Auschwitz by Primo Levi. One of the things he establishes in his books is that it wasn't the very best people, according to him, who survived the camps. Sometimes tzaddikim survived, and sometimes Beinonim survived. In the end, all Kedoshim are holy, don't get me wrong. But according to Primo Levi, he was saying it wasn't necessarily the most virtuous conduct in the camps that allowed people to thrive. It was the people who were willing to do anything to survive. The ones who would steal a piece of bread. The ones who would avoid difficult tasks at the expense of other prisoners. Who would sneak, who would hide away, who would switch names. Those are the people who more often than not would have a better chance of survival. In one of his works, Moments of Reprieve, he writes that when the reveille sounds, first of all, we put on our shoes, otherwise somebody will steal them. And it's an unspeakable tragedy. And so I want to ask you a question. All's fair in love and war, but think about the example I just gave from Primo Levi. Is that really the lesson? If you wish to survive in this brutal and unforgiving world, in this callous place, you'd better be crafty. You'd better be a little selfish. You had better be willing to beg, to steal, to borrow. What about survival during a natural disaster? What about survival during an international pandemic? Are you allowed to hoard food supplies, toilet paper, medicine? May you use power, money, fame to secure a flu test or a respirator when a more needy individual cannot access them. According to the rules of survival, that all's fair in love and war, we must do and can do whatever we are able to in order to survive. And if that's the message of Yetzias Mitzrayim, if that's what we want to learn, that it's you versus the world, that we're teaching our children the absolute value of survival and taking for you, then maybe they'll be very rich and wealthy one day when all this ends. But will they be virtuous? Will they grow into the types of people we would say we'd be proud to call them Jews, human beings? Or is there something more going on here? So some say, okay, let's take a step back. We have the Afikoman, we have the theme of theft and Leil HaSeder and Yetzias Mitzrayim, but maybe that's not really what the Afikoman is about. Rav Yair Bachrach in the Makor Chaim says, Mikom Makom Yesh Panim Limchos Ulevatel HaMinhag. Don't steal. Don't keep the minhag to steal the Afikoman. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach echoed that sentiment in Halichos Shlomo, and he says, absolutely, we should not steal, but he says not only that, don't say Genevas Afikoman, stealing the Afikoman. Say Chatifas Afikoman, taking hold of it, but we never steal. But what do we do with this minhag? The Rambam's father, Maimon Hadayon, in a keta here in a paragraph about his perush on Philos, he's talking about the sacred nature of Minhagei Yisrael. Customs of the Jewish people are sacred. Customs of the Jewish people are holy. And in talking about Minhagei Yisrael, he says, Ein lahakel b'shum minhag. Don't be lenient when it comes to any minhag. Don't scoff at a minhag. Don't be mevaza in a minhag ha'umah that the Navi tells you to do it, or that later on a rabbi tells you about. A minhag is sacred. A minhag is holy. And which minhag was Maimon Hadayan, was the Rambam's father talking about? He was referring to the minhag to eat sufganiyot on Chanukah. Oh, the heilige minhag to eat those jelly donuts. And if that's an important minhag, then certainly it's an important minhag to hide the Afikoman and to steal the Afikoman, because these are sacred minhagim. Another approach as to why perhaps we put so much emphasis on this is that the Rambam is misunderstood. Remember earlier we said the Afikoman to steal, the Choktim Zemizem means to steal. Says Reb Chaim Brisker, it doesn't mean to steal. L'maran hagrach lo hayanicha minag shaketanim chotfinis avikom aviem hayamanicho makom meshumar ad shas achilaso. The father would take the matzah, put it in a place that was watched under his mop, under the tablecloth, behind the seat, nearby. So it was meshumar. It was guarded. It was protected. Why would we want to protect the Afikoman? Because the Afikoman is a zikaron. It's a commemoration of the Karban Pesach. And the Karban Pesach required shmira. You had to watch it. Nothing should touch it. Nothing should become tamei. It shouldn't become defiled, impure. So we take the Afikoman and we watch it. We hide it in sight of the Baal HaSeudah, Baal HaSeder, so nobody should go near it. Not only should people not take the Afikoman away from you, but you should watch the Afikoman because it's a commemoration of the Karban Pesach that required Shmira. But Reb Chaim takes it one step further. He says normally there is a halacha. There's a halacha when it comes to Seudah etiquette of how we eat, of what we do when we engage in our meals. And the halacha is that the Baal HaSeudah is botzei atchila. That the person who makes hamotzi, that person has to take the bread first and eat it. This is the rule of Derech Eretz all year long. You make hamotzi, you don't grab hamotzi off the plate. It would be a chutzpah to do such a thing. It's not derech eretz. That's the way we pass in the Shulchan Aruch. But Leil HaSeder, we violate that standard. V'leil Pesach huter l'mesubin lachtov matzah v'lechos af kol sheyitum abotzim mevarach v'hu kedei la'orot tinoka shlo yishal. What was the Rambam talking about? The Rambam was saying we have a minhag on Leil HaSeder to violate the normal etiquette of meals. And we allow children and everyone else to grab the matzah the moment you do motzi matzah, because we want to keep them engaged and awake. And when there's action, it's exciting. There's matzah broken up on the table, and everyone's diving into the center and grabbing motzi, grabbing matzah. That's exciting. It keeps them awake. But not to take the Afikoman. There's no minhag to steal the Afikoman. That's not what the Rambam meant. So two things. Reb Chaim says, number one, that the Afikoman is hid away because it's meshumar, because it's Karban Pesach. And number two, we have a minhag to take the matzah when you make hamotzi to keep people excited. One other approach that exists is the Makor Chaim, who says minhag shatinogas gonfim Afikoman hu lechabeves mitzvos. It's to make mitzvos beloved to you, that you love mitzvos. How much do you love mitzvos? Look how eager you are to grab the matzah, to grab the Afikoman. It's exciting, but it doesn't mean to steal. There's one other minhag I'll give you, and then I'll move around to what I think is the message in all of this. Perhaps there is a reason we want to leave behind a piece of matzah for later. Shulchan Aruch and Aruch Chaim, Siman Taf Kuf Siv Gimel, has an interesting halacha which is bizarre. Ein nokvin nekev b'basar b'sakin litlosabav b'yad mutter. When you are on Yontif and you poke a hole through the meat, everyone does that on Yontif, of course. We puncture holes through meat all the time. But when you poke a hole through meat, don't do it with a knife, use your hand. Obviously, in the era of Corona, we never do anything like that with our fingers. But the question is, why would anyone want to poke a hole through a piece of meat? To hang it up like a salami? The answer is very simple. People used to purchase meat, and customers would come and they'd pick up the meat that they ordered in advance. So you would poke a hole through it to hang it up on the wall. Ve'imla so simin, but if you want to know that Mr. Schwartz or Mrs. Rosenberg purchased the meat, then all you have to do is then you could mark it up with a knife. Because then you could make a simin in the meat. Good, this was a custom. They used to mark the meat, poke a hole through it to hang it up. Customers would pick it up on Yontif, but you don't do it with a knife because that's uvdin dechol. That's the way we usually do things in the week. So we do things in a more Yontif-dik way. You do with your finger, you do hamish. Take a look at the Magen Avram in source 31 on that halacha. The Magen Avram says that tzarich shinoi, you need a change. Because mekach umemcher is asur bo, you don't want to engage in sales on Yontif. So to show the world that we don't engage in mekach umemcher, in sales on Yontif, we poke a hole through the meat with your thumb as opposed to with a knife. The imkain, mutter linkov chatichas afikoman bepesach litloso deloki yesh machmirin, but he says that there is a heter to puncture a hole through the Afikoman. That's allowed. We're on the topic of poking a hole through meat. There's a minhag to poke a hole through the Afikoman and hang it up on the wall. I don't know about you. In my home, we don't have this minhag. Some homes have the minhag to carry the Afikoman over their shoulder. Some people have the minhag to steal the Afikoman. But no one has the custom, as far as I know, to poke a hole through the Afikoman and wear it around your neck like a charm. If you look at the Mefarshim, they point out that there was a belief that there was some sort of segula, some sort of spiritual protection, divine protection afforded to those who would hold the Afikoman. There's a story that's recorded in the book Moses Montefiore, Jewish liberator, imperial hero by Abigail Green, written a few years ago. She writes a story about Montefiore's family who were traveling on November 26th, I think it was, November 26th, 1827, and in the diaries of both Montefiore and his wife, they recorded they were going on a trip from Alexandria in Egypt and they were relocating to Malta, the base of Italy. And all of a sudden, what should have been a shorter trip became a torrential downpour and a storm. Describe such storm is out of my power, wrote Montefiore. The sea was truly running mountains high, every instant breaking over the ship in a manner almost to swamp her and sticking against her sides with a violence it appeared a miracle for her to withstand. Indeed, my poor Judith almost gave herself up for lost. 2 days later, he writes, as gathering clouds promised another dreadful storm, made a desperate appeal for divine intervention. Shortly before noon on November 26th, think about November, it's long after Pesach, Montefiore threw into the sea a piece of Passover cake, at the same time praying to God to preserve us as he had in old time preserved our forefathers. Montefiore records that as he threw it into the sea, things became smooth and calm, and a fine moonlight evening set in. Thanks to the Almighty, we are again in security. You see, there was a belief that he held on to this precious Afikoman, and that right at the moment he threw it in. And he says this was a new experience of the Kriyas Yamsuf. Torrential storm in the water as the Jewish people and their descendants were now threatened at sea. And they took out the beloved cake, the Passover cake, the Afikoman. And every year in the family, in the Sebag Montefiore family, they have a custom to read at the Seder the diary of Montefiore, and this passage about that fateful night in which he was saved at sea by God because of the Afikoman. And so perhaps we hold on to our Afikoman. Perhaps we hold on to it as a segula. We take it and we show not only as a zichron Pesach, as a commemoration of Pesach, but we also say that God is still protecting us. This year we could use a magic charm like that. something to take with us to say, God is protecting me. If only we had that ability to say that with confidence. Perhaps that's what this is about. The Jewish people throughout history have always had a hard time. So chotfim as a matzos, chotfim as Afikoman is to say, we are taking the protection, we are holding on to that piece of matzah as divine coverage. But I want to share with you one final approach, and this will make up the bulk of the rest of this year. It's easy to explain everything away as theft, deception of the Seder, as either something you had to do, like the Abarbanel, or something that is not really about theft. You misunderstood the Rambam. It's easy to explain about charms and segulos. But you can't ignore the fact that everything in Thieves Mitzrayim is really about a redemption brought about through Geneva, through a lie. We didn't have to lie to Paro, and we did. We didn't have to steal their clothing, and we were told to do so. And yet, on that night, we take the Afikoman, we steal it, because there's something integral. There's some tie-in here between the theme of theft and Yetzias Mitzrayim. I want to share with you a stunning medrash. It's a Pirkei of Eliezer and Perek Lamed Bet. And the medrash recounts the story of a familiar story in the Bible, when Yaakov was sent to get the blessings from his father, the blessings that were intended for Esav. And then the medrash says, what night was it? When in the calendar was it that Rivka instructs Yaakov to go and steal the brachos from Esav while he's out hunting? It was Leil HaPesach. It was Seder night, but obviously in advance of Yetzias Mitzrayim and the Jewish people existing as a nation. My son Esav, the otros, the treasuries of heaven are open tonight. Go, and I want to give you brachos. Go, make for me a tasty snack. And of course, when Rivka hears this, she says, go quickly and go catch for your father 2 young goats. Why did Yitzchak need 2 goats? Why in the world does Yitzchak have to eat 2 goats? One's not enough. Rather, one was the Karban Pesach and one was the Sova that comes with the Karban Pesach. The 2 animals that we eat, Pesach, and we have the Chagiga to fill in the extra pieces. So you eat all the Sova. And this was, of course, in advance of real Pesach. But because it was Pesach night, it was Seder night, long in the future, before ever we had a holiday of Pesach, they had to make for Yitzchak 2 different karbanos, 2 different animals. Nichnas amar lo kum na shva v'achla mitzidei amar Yitzchak hakol Yaakov. The voice is the voice of my Yaakov. B'yichur Hashem v'yadayim midei Esav b'shvichus dam v'chom mavis ra. But it's the hands of Esav. It's the hands of a thief. So I want to ask you a question. The Medrash records that this story took place on the night of Pesach. On the night of Pesach, we have an event about stealing the brachos that belong to someone else. And the future of the Jewish people begins at this moment. We are the Ala Nivchar because of that bracha. And it was all based on a Maisa Geneva. It was all based upon theft. We had to steal. We had to steal the brachos. And that had to take place specifically on Seder night. Can't be coincidental. It cannot be coincidental that the Medrash describes the greatest act of historic theft in the Avos as taking place on Pesach night. Again, what is this Medrash trying to teach us? So I was thinking about this. And I want to say something, I don't know if it's rooted in truth, but it sounds real to me. What is the cheftza of mitzvah? What is the object that we use on Pesach? What is the symbol of Pesach? Everybody knows it's the matzah, the lechem oni. Why do we have matzah? It says in Dvarim, lo socha alav chametz, don't eat chametz shivas yamim. Tocha alav matzos lechem oni, ki b'chipazon yatsasa mitzrayim, l'man tizkor es yom tizcha mitzrayim kol yimei chayecha. You eat matzah, the unleavened bread, because God rushed you out of Egypt very quickly. There was no time for the bread to rise, that every child knows. It was half-baked, literally. It was a half-baked meal. And we eat matzah and refrain from chametz on Pesach because when we left Egypt, we left like a band of thieves. We ran out in the middle of the night. There was no time for the bread to rise like a thief, like a fugitive. And we must remember on this night the redemption that came to this band of thieves. So here's what I want to suggest. Anybody who's learning the Daf Yomi knows that a few days ago we talked about the standard of the minimal amount of cooking that must be done for a piece of food to be considered cooked, such that the food is cooked and you can now continue to allow it to stay on the crock pot or on a hot plate, on a blech, throughout Shabbos. How cooked does your cholent have to be that you can continue to allow it to cook? How cooked does your food have to be that you could leave it on the blech? The answer is, says the Gemara Shabbos, Daf Chaf Amud Aleph, Amar Rabbi Elazar Amar Rav, Kidesh Yitzolu Mibod Yom Kemachal Ben Drusai. The amount it has to cook is the food of Ben Drusai. Ben Drusai, Rashi says, who's Ben Drusai? Listim Haya. He was a criminal. He was a thief. Because he was a thief, he was always on the run. He was always on the lam, so his food didn't cook more than a third. The Rambam paskins, it's a half. Rashi says it's a third. There's a halachic nafkamina, whether your food for Shabbos is to be a third cooked or half cooked. But either way, the source of cooking on Shabbos, of your Shabbos dika meal, is Machal Ben Drusai, a criminal, a thief. So I always thought this is difficult. I understand we needed a contemporary example in the Gemara for someone, for what it means to be a third cooked. And maybe there was maybe it was known that if you're on the run, so therefore, you're not going to have much time for food to cook. That's the minimal standard. The minimal culinary enjoyment is a third or a half. But why name the thief? Why tie in Shabbos dika meal, a holy Shabbos? It doesn't sound to me like tanugim, like basar dagim, barbarim, slavu dagim. It sounds like a half-cooked meal. A half-cooked meal. If you came home on Shabbos, you were expecting, and the table was all arranged beautifully, and the china was out, and the glasses, and the crystal glasses, the wine was poured, and they delivered a pashtida, a kugel that was raw, that was half-cooked. Or a cholent where the beans were still hard, but it was minimally acceptable. The bare minimum. Would you call that a Shabbos dika meal? But I think there's a point. We left Mitzrayim b'chipazon. There was no time for the food to bake. It wasn't a feast fit for a king. It was a feast that was fit for a broken slave, who somehow, and for whatever inexplicable reason, the Kadosh Baruch Hu saw fit to redeem that person. Ben Drusai, in a funny way, is a holy thief. He's a Shabbos dika thief. It's a story that is told about the Baal Shem Tov, that he once asked in Shamayim, in the heavens, about the reward of someone who observed the Shabbos in the most exalted way. In the heavens, they showed him two golden thrones, one next to the other, and they said to him, Baal Shem, this one is for you, and the one next to it is for a person you have to go find. Baal Shem is intrigued. Someone is going to be my soulmate in Shamayim, is going to sit next to me in Shamayim. Who's this Shabbos dika Jew? Who's this Halei Yid who observes the Shabbos and will be on my level in Shamayim? So he set out on his journey. He gets his Alexei. Alexei is not his electronic assistant. Alexei was his driver. He tells Alexei, let's get in the wagon. They drive for a while and they arrive at the house of this person. Doesn't look like a Jew at all. There's not a Jew in the neighborhood. There's no beard. There's no payas. There's no yarmulke. There's no mezuzah on the door. And they walk in. The place doesn't look like a Jewish home. There's no svarim. There's no Judaica. Right? It doesn't look like anything like a Jewish home should look. And the person is there. And he invites him in. He says he could spend Shabbos there. Why not? Friday night comes, he doesn't light candles, and he doesn't daven, and he doesn't make a bracha, and he's eating treif, and he's Michal Shabbos in every single way. And then a party comes in, and it looks like a nightclub, and there's dancing and music, and ruffians walk in, and you have people, they don't look like they've ever met a Jew in their lives. And the whole party's over, the place is trashed, it doesn't look like Yiddishkeit, and the Baal Shem is utterly confused. This person has a throne next to mine in Gan Eden. Guy says to him, I want you to know that I'm Jewish. I'm Jewish, and I was taken captive as a young boy, and I don't remember much about my Judaism. They told me that if I try to run or return home, they're going to kill me. So I promised myself that when I was taken, I would never forget about Judaism, but I don't remember much. All I remember is that Shabbos was very important in my home, and we had a lot of guests. So I'm not a rich man. I buy the cheapest, simplest food during the week, and I save all my money for Shabbos, and I put out the biggest party, and I observe the best foods, and I celebrate in the happiest ways that I know possible. Baal Shem considered this. He said, Gevald, what a holy Jew. What a beautiful Jew who understands Shabbos on the inside of what it's supposed to be. He says, wow, if this guy celebrates like this, now imagine if I teach him the laws of Shabbos. And he thought for a second, and he opened up his mouth to teach the halachos, and nothing came out. And he tried again, and the Baal Shem couldn't speak, as if he was being stopped divinely from teaching, as if he heard a voice in his head, Baal Shem, think about what you're about to do. If your intentions might be pure, but if you teach this guy about Shabbos, then he's going to realize that he's been doing it wrong his whole life. All the simcha, all the heartfelt joy that he's had all these years, he's going to know that he was desecrating Shabbos. It's going to be terrible. It'll be a disaster. This is not halacha l'maisa, by the way. I wouldn't practice this in real life. You have an obligation to teach someone who wants to learn. But how can I do it? Is it worth it? At this stage in life, in this circumstance, to teach him Shabbos, if by doing so we're going to destroy the man's spirit and take away his joy. So the Besh thanked the man again for his hospitality on Motzei Shabbos. He climbed into his wagon and he drove away. I want to ask you the following question. Maybe there are two kinds of Shabbos meals. There's a perfectly cooked Shabbos meal, a gourmet chef, right, from all the cookbooks and the food bloggers. And then there is the Machal Ben Drusai. The minimal Shabbos, the best we can do. It's not perfect, it's broken. But it's another kind of Shabbos. It also earns a seat on the throne in Shamayim. What kind of Pesach would you prefer? A perfectly cooked gourmet meal, 5-star chef, in a hotel with 2,000 strangers, gorging themselves over endless supplies of food. They wake up and they eat, and they have a brunch, they have a lunch in a tea room, they go, and all day long they're stuffing their mouths with food. Or a Pesach prepared eagerly by a new cook, newly married maybe old recipes, flawed, flustered, tired, exhausted, but a meal prepared with love. And what's better? Hearing Rabbi Jonathan Sachs, who's phenomenal, and other A-listers regaling you with majestic but well-rehearsed Divrei Torah, or your kids' Divrei Torah at their little handmade Haggadahs with their terrible artwork strewn across the table. Which one's the type of Pesach that you want? And it's the latter that we're being forced to experience this year. On Pesach, we learn to accept the people in our lives, the parts of our lives that are broken. It's that acceptance that makes us whole. It's the Geneva, it's the thief, it's the little broken one, and what God is trying to tell us, maybe, if I could suggest, a virus which is forcing us to be at home, to drop our routine, to abandon our plans, our commitments. All of the order that we have artificially manufactured is gone. Nothing these days is certain. Nothing is certain at all. Not our health, not our jobs, not our beloved Pesach programs, not our guest lists, not our shuls, our yeshivos, our schools, our retirement plan, our scientific knowledge, our safety precautions. All of them are meaningless. Even our leaders, the most haughty of them, have become uncharacteristically humbled. We're all broken. We're all deeply and painfully aware of that fallibility, the crack in our plan. And yet we attempt to make order out of all this. We give terutzim and homeopathic cures and segulos. And we create schedules for our children. We post them proudly on social media. And we tell everyone, follow along. Look what my day I'm going to have. Ask that parent how the schedule worked out for them the next night. How many of us can brag at the end of the day that the Seder we articulated was a success? That the household wasn't in disarray? Whatever we contrived and plotted and mapped out, slowly but surely it failed. Whatever we had designed, we must come to face with the most cruel and unforgiving truth, that we control nothing. This disease, this beast which has interrupted everything, has changed our world, threatened our loved ones, toppled our institutions. It has forced us to focus inward on family, on each other, on children, on ourselves. And sometimes we don't like what we see. What we see is a thief, a broken person, and someone who's not worthy of redemption in our own estimation. We're living in a life of Zoom now. And when we zoom in, you see imperfections. You see magnified in front under a giant spotlight every little mistake, idiosyncrasy, every tick, every terrible midah, every bad habit. It's on display 24/7. You can't escape anymore to shul. You can't escape anymore to school. You can't escape anymore to work. You have to confront the reality that's under your roof. And you have to look at that Seder. The one that was targeting order, Seder. And it ends up a little chaotic, like a war zone. The beginning, everything's so beautifully arranged. The end of the evening, there's matzah pieces, sticky floors, grape juice stains all over the place, cranky people. Someone's half asleep on the floor over there. Someone's yelling at this one. It's an imperfect construct. And the irony of an evening called Seder that ends up with such a lack of order is maybe because sometimes a little chaos brings us the order we seek and crave and need just now. A little bit to say we don't have control. That the goal of this year's Seder is to accept a lack of Seder in our lives and love it. Jordan Peterson, renowned Canadian psychologist and professor, best-selling author of 12 Rules for Life, an Antidote to Chaos. In one of his final chapters lays out a very important principle. The principle is, do not bother children when they are skateboarding. He describes that back in his day in Cindy Smith Hall, where he teaches in the University of Toronto, outside there's a set of steps, a wide set of steps, and there's about an iron handrail, a tubular handrail, 2.5 inches in diameter, 20 feet long, and the crazy kids, almost always boys, would pull back 15 yards, and they'd start to skateboard at full speed. Then as they get to the handrail, before they crash into it, they lift up the bottom on one edge of the skateboard, they jump up on the handrail, and they slide down, gliding down the handrail. Sometimes the board would land and be propelled to a smooth landing gracefully, and other times they would land on their knees. But either way, they were soon back at it again. Describes that it wasn't long afterwards, and there was also another side of the hall where they had these concrete planters, and the kids would slide their skateboards across them, daredevils. But he says that he admired them. He says, I thought they deserved a pat on the back and some honest admiration. Of course it was dangerous. Danger was the point. They wanted to triumph over danger. They would have been safer in protective equipment, but that would have ruined it. They weren't trying to be safe. They were trying to become competent, and it's competence that makes people as safe as they can truly be. He describes that shortly afterwards, someone around that area put these skate stoppers, these ugly, hideous metal brackets that made it look like a prison cell or some sort of third world country, some sort of dystopian world, so the skateboarders couldn't go smoothly along the rail, along the edge of the planters anymore. And this ruined it for those kids. The kids who were a little bit dangerous, a little bit reckless, a little bit broken, stickle thieves, couldn't get in trouble anymore. But the biggest problem is they couldn't become competent anymore either. And the world that became so safe was now just hideous and ugly. It had Seder, but it had no order whatsoever. Peterson ends his cautionary tale with a final warning which applies equally to young girls as it does to boys. He says, it will object just as vociferously and self-righteously when little girls try to stand on their own 2 feet and defend themselves. It negates consciousness. It's anti-human, desires of failure, jealous, resentful, destructive. No one truly on the side of humanity would ally him or herself with such a thing. No one aiming at moving up would allow him or herself to become possessed by such a thing, the control, the order. And if you think rough men are dangerous, if you think tough men are dangerous, wait until you see what weak men are capable of. Leave children alone when they are skateboarding. And so if every wrestling match in your house is stopped, kids won't learn what hurts. They won't learn that their actions have ramifications. They won't learn about what's tolerable, what's offensive, and what's over the line, what's not. If every bike ride is dangerous, they won't know how to explore, create, find new cures, and they'll be wholly unprepared for times like these. Moments in history which demand flexibility and acceptance and change and going with the flow. If you stop young people or anyone from pursuing excellence and competency in the name of order, we protect them in the moment, but we create ugliness and a lack of motivation and control, which is unnatural. It's stifling. Your kids are going a little nutty around the house now. Thank God they're kids. That's what they're meant to do. When the plan we had for a nice evening turns into the unexpected, understand what we're dealing with. Holy thieves. Imperfection, which needs to be embraced and loved and redeemed and celebrated, so we can learn about boundaries, test the limits, so we can grow, so we can remain not bored and not stagnant. On Seder night, we channel that inner thief. A nation of thieves can be ready to accept the yoke of heaven 2 months later, because they are the ones who haven't claimed to figure out all the answers. It's only people who don't have order in their lives, who are a little bit broken, whose bread is half-baked, can accept the wholeness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And only a people so broken as us right now, with no shuls, with no public observance, can know what Torah life is really about. There's a beautiful story that's told by Rav Amital in the book By Faith Alone, the biography by Yosef Reichner. Yehuda Amital, who became the Rosh Yeshiva at Har Tzion with Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Zatzal. And as a little boy in Cheder, like other boys in the community, they had their curriculum and they had their schoolyard. And the way it worked with his Cheder, the Malamed would teach them individually, and then the rest would play in the schoolyard. And the Malamed would say to them, each Yidel is going to have to answer the questions, both their test, and when they get to Shemayim, they're going to have to answer questions. And he would talk to them about the Mashiach. He talked about the coming of the Mashiach, and he said to these little children, when the Mashiach comes, he's going to give you a bechina. And he's to say to each Yidel, and Yehuda's name was Yidel, his nickname was Yidel. So Rabbi Yehuda Amital thought that the Malamed was talking just to him. And each Yidel is going to have to respond to the Mashiach. When the Messiah's arrival arrives and subsequent assessment of Yehuda's Torah knowledge, he anticipated that day, he dreamed for that day. One day, Rabbi Yehuda, as a young boy, was in the schoolyard. And he looked up and he thought he saw a shooting star in the sky. Within seconds, he assumed it was the Mashiach, who he'd heard so much about in Cheder. And he told his friends, and they gathered around near a tree, and they began to dance and song. And they sang V'taher libeinu li'ovtecha b'yemes, which became an anthem and the very theme of Rav Amital's spiritual approach. V'taher libeinu li'ovtecha b'yemes, purify our hearts. The Mashiach was coming. He saw the star. And the boys, led by Yehuda, quickly went to wash their hands, because these little children had so much emunah that they thought the Mashiach was imminent. But the Malamed came out. And the Malamed put an end to the revelry and the celebration, and little Yehuda felt terribly disappointed. For a long time, he remained convinced that had the Malamed not intervened, he and his friends would have met the Mashiach himself. When you stop kids when they're skateboarding, when you stop them from being a little boisterous, a little rowdy, when you try to impose order on everything in your world, and that every person and every employee and every friend and every institution has to meet your standards of perfection, of that canned, beautiful image that you had in mind from some magical experience out there, then ultimately there's no room for Mashiach. Ultimately there's no room for Matan Torah. There's no room for real redemption, because real redemption is predicated on a band of people acknowledging their flaws and their brokenness, their inadequacies, and celebrating that, and redeeming that. And that's what the Rebbeinu Shalom wants from us. Stop expecting the world to be perfect and to fit into your little design. Accept a little bit of chaos. Don't be such a stickler for the rules all the time. Ksos HaChoshen encapsulates this notion perfectly by citing a well-known midrash about God casting truth onto the floor. The Medrash begins in Bereshit Rabbah, Rabbi Simon B'Shash Shebara Kadosh Baruch Hu Esa Adam Nasu Malachi Asharas Kisos Mehem Omrim Yivra Mehem Omrim Lo Yivra. There were two groups of angels in Shamayim. One group said you should create the world. It's a group of Chesed. The world is built Olam Chesed Yibaneh. The world is constructed to give, to perfect, to help people grow, to accept others, to love others who are less than perfect. And the other group of angels said, no, Emes, God's name is insignia, is truth, and this is a world of sheker, and human beings are flawed from the get-go. We cannot accept a human being and the Torah and the world together. The angels said, absolutely not. And so you had chesed and emes going against one another, telling God, you should create the world, you should not create the world. What did Hashem do? Ma'asa HaKadosh Baruch Hu notol emes v'shlicha arza. He took truth and he cast it to the ground. And he said, this is a world that needs chesed. This is a world in which the rofim yaskimu asama mazik shu tov umoyo. If the doctors agree that a certain medicine which hurts you is necessary in the moment, then you must administer it, even if it feels pain, even if it looks like sheker. MS argued, don't create the world. The human experiment is an error. It's just another dangerous skateboard park with potential lawsuits and centuries filled with despots and treachery, war and diseases. Why do we need a world like that? Don't do it, God, we beg you. But Hashem said there's a time to embrace holy thieves. Thieves who break convention, who defy the odds, who discover new potential. Just as the doctors at times have to prescribe a medicine which causes momentary harm, and poskim have to advocate for positions that tell you to close down shuls. And Bati Midrasha, we live in an imperfect world. By design, we are charged with navigating the challenges to the best of our abilities. Our mandate is to adapt. The rituals that a month ago anchored our very lives are now forbidden, according to all of the poskim. That we must cast that aside to build a better and safer world for tomorrow is MS being thrown to the ground and accepting the embrace of the holy thief. We have to learn to accept the imperfect, not only at the Seder, but in our lives. In a world so close to the end of history, to the end of perfection, the last piece of perfection is to drop that demand and just accept people where they are. Accept life where it is and work with it and innovate and create and build and wonder and dream. This will end soon. This darkness that we are in will come to a close. We'll be back next year, I hope, inside the shuls, with more people to participate live in a real Shabbos HaGadol drasha. Hopefully long before that. And there will be a Shabbos that we all return. And I've been thinking about that Shabbos for a while because we've had our thoughts now to ourselves. I've been thinking about that moment and what it might look like. The davening, the intensity on that Shabbos, the love, the tfilos. There'll be no conversation, only to Hashem. It'll be so intense, it'll be so beautiful, it'll be so cherished, we'll long for that moment. And we're going to get there on that day, and the very first Friday night, the Kabbalah Shabbos before, and we're going to turn to each other. And before we daven, we're going to take each other's hands, and maybe we'll be too frightened to do so, so we'll hesitate, because we won't even know what a handshake is like after what has transpired. And maybe we won't even be shaking hands again for a long time, I don't know. But it's not really important. For whenever we do greet each other, in whatever capacity we choose to do so, at that moment reach out and embrace one another. Despite the flaws, despite the imperfections. Reach out to the broken and the whole. Reach out to the brokenhearted. The poor, the rich, the introvert, the extrovert. Reach out to whoever was affected by this machla, and that's everyone, no matter who you are, no matter how secure your home is, no matter how secure you thought your 401k was. Reach out to everyone. Reach out to the less than perfect spouse, to the rascally child, to the ones who hide the Afikoman and steal it away, to the ones who break your furniture, to the ones who scream when you're on the phone. Reach out to your less than perfect self and tell that person how much you missed them. And let this be a wake-up call. Tell them how you waited months to see them again, to talk to them, and that you accept them for who they are. Talk to them, redeem them, and set them free. And may we all be zocha this year to a chag kasher v'sameach. May there be no more pain and suffering, no more illness, a complete refuah. Let us gather together soon like the dream of young Rabbi Yehuda Amital. And maybe we'll see a shooting star. But hopefully this time no one will wake us up from our vision. This time no one will stop us. and maybe we'll see the Mashiach's arrival very soon. Chag Kasher V'Sameach. Thank you for joining.